Oh, what? You didn't know the world's finest were actually the world's finest dads? Well, they are, or will be, or used to be? What the fuck, Bendis? What the fuck, Priest? What is going on with this DC timeline? Anyway, Batman had a kid with Talia al Ghul in The Son of the Demon, and she gave it away for adoption, spoiler alert, for a 31-year-old comic. Hey, don't care about that kid, because they had another kid who was a test tube baby. And maybe it wasn't even Bruce's. I'll never tell. Woof, all this retconning gets tiring. Anyway, long story short, Damian Wayne is Bruce's son, who was trained by the League of Assassins, and he's really smart and angry, and he's a little dick. Superman's son, Jonathan Kent, was born when... Convergence happened. John is the son of Lois and Clark Kent. It's pretty straightforward. So, released in 2017, written by Peter Tomasi with art by Jorge Jimenez and Alizon, and Alison Borges. I forgot how to say it. I looked it up the other day and now I can't remember. This is Super Sons Volume 1, When I Grow Up. The book begins with a prologue. In the living room of a family made of a portly father, a mother, oldest son named Archie, a young daughter, and a teen son named Reggie. Reggie asks and receives some of Archie's popcorn, and then he has his mother relinquish her blanket because he feels cold. And then he asks his dad to borrow the car tomorrow, and then he has his sister give him a pillow. Then, after all of that, he stands up and asks for a big group hug. Then his family stare at him silently, and he shouts, "I said, group hug!" And they all hug, and it's revealed that the living room is actually a set with lighting and monitors and cameras, I guess, hiding in the darkness a few feet away. Cut to now. In Hamilton County, located 300 miles from Metropolis, Jonathan Kent walks through the snow in his front lawn and waits for the bus. Then he gets on and asks where Pat, the regular driver, is, and the weird old man who's driving tells him Pat's out sick. So John sits down, but he can't help himself from sticking up for a kid who's being bullied. But he's shot with spitballs, and the bus driver just yells at all of them to cut out this shit. After school, John and his friends go out into the courtyard or whatever and get into a snowball fight with the bullies, until one of those little fucks puts a rock in a snowball and hits the kid from earlier, causing a cut to his head. And then he considers blasting them with his heat vision, but he's like, no, that's not me. They're cornered against the wall as the bullies creep closer, winding up their tiny arms, but suddenly a giant snowball falls off the roof and crushes them, probably breaking a few of their bones. Then John looks up to the roof and sees the bus driver. The trio walk away, and then John runs off and finds the bus driver standing in an alley. John asks what he's doing at the school, and the bus driver says, "Wanted to see how the other half lives." Then the bus driver removes his face to reveal Damian Wayne, wearing stilts. Then he pulls out another fucking mask, and John's like, "You were my substitute teacher that day in third period?" Also, you should note that John is 10 and Damian's 13. So Damian puts his disguise back on because he still has to drive the fucking kids home. He can't just leave them there at the school. He still has to finish his job and go collect his paycheck, because that's just the life of a good bus driver. John says that the rules say you have to be at least 16 to drive, but Damian's like, "Rules? Really?" Then they both board the bus. Later that night in Wayne Manor's subterranean Batcave, Damian trains with batarangs as Bruce walks through. Oh, what the fuck is wrong with his face? Did he get stung by a giant fucking bee? Did Selena punch him too hard when they were on their honeymoon? Oh, that's right. Damian parkours over Alfred and then starts getting suited up. Batman asks what he's doing and then tells Damian he is behind on 5 homework assignments and he blew off class today. Damian tells his pops, maybe, that he already knows everything and he doesn't need school. Then Bruce is like, "Did you give me your word about your studies?" "Yes." "Then keep it." And then he drives away. Meanwhile, at the Kent residence, Clark, John, and damn, Lois, talk about a schwilft! That stands for a superhero's wife I'd like to sit at a table playing cards. John is asking his dad about what he should do about the urges he has to use his powers, even a little. And Clark asks if he did use his powers, but John says maybe he threw a few hard snowballs at the bullies. Then Clark assures him that John did exactly what he and Lois expected of him, and that they're proud. Clark then tells him that he doesn't need a special symbol on his chest to be a hero. He just needs to be one when it counts. Then Lois celebrates her victory as Clark gets a call. He strips in front of his wife and son and into his Superman costume before he kisses Lois and hugs John and flies away into the night sky. Later that night, John is about to go to sleep under a moderately oversized moon, and suddenly a voice comes from the shadows. John jumps up with his heat vision on the ready, but discovers it's just Damian. Damian makes fun of him for going to bed at 9 p.m. and John's like,
I could have blasted you, and then I would have dodged your blast and incapacitated you with a well-placed kick to the solar plexus. Well, I would have dodged your kick and knocked you out with a left hook.
Then Lois calls out to John and opens his door and asks if everything's okay, so he puts some porn on his laptop to make everything seem normal, and Lois tells him to go to bed and closes the door. So Damian hangs from a branch outside and tells John that he decided to let him in on a little investigation in Metropolis. John asks what it is, and Damian tells him there's been, like, break-ins and hacking attempts into LexCorp facilities, and then Damian asks what John's name is, and he's like,
What? It's Jonathan Kent. You know that, right? You know my name.
But Damian tells him that his name is Superboy, which means it's time to ditch the bedtime and be super. Then, like a sadistic Peter Pan coming in the night and bringing away John to the comic book world of Neverland that is the greater DC universe, they disappear into the night. Later, over the stormy and referential night skies of Metropolis, Superboy bounds over the rooftops as Robin swings. They arrive across the street to a LexCorp building, so they scale the side, when from behind them they hear a voice that says, "Horrible weather for a break-in and entering." The boys turn around and find Lex Luthor, who at this point in time was like a quote-unquote good guy with a pretty sick suit. Cut to a dilapidated warehouse. Reggie plays hide-and-seek with his family. Also, there are now 3 Reggies. That's right, he can duplicate himself. So the Reggies begin searching for the poorly hidden idiots. First he finds Archie, the big brother who thought he was better than him. Then he finds his dad, who didn't think Reggie was good enough to be a superhero. And finally, his mom, always there to protect him until she wasn't. And then the Reggies brutally kill each member of their family, as their sister watches in horror. Then Reggie reveals his true name. Kid Amazo! Who is Amazo, and how did he get laid, I hear you ask? I'll answer half of that question. Amazo was an android built by a mad scientist who could replicate the powers of the individual Justice League members. Oh, wait, what? Oh, no. That's not this version. This is the Amazo, the android version. You want the Amazo Virus? That's down the hall. Let me get the door for you. Bye. Hope you enjoyed your stay here. I guess I'll never see you again. Watches in horror. Then Reggie reveals his true name. Kid Amazo! Who is Amazo, and how did he get laid, I hear you ask? I'll answer half of that question. The Amazo Virus was a virus created by Lex Luthor based on the android Amazo. Instead, this time, it gave powers to those who didn't have them, and removed powers from those who had. Anyway, back in Metropolis, Luthor demands to know which of them is going to explain what is going on. Then Damian turns and says,
All that power and you still can't cure that rampant alopecia, Super Lex?
Damn, Damian, that's fucking Jesus, alright. Lex tells them that this is a school night, and then grabs Damian's grappling hook and tells them to get off his building. Then Damian drops John, and tells Luthor that he can't fly, which is a fact. He can't. So, Lex races downward to catch the falling boy from the pavement as Damian shoots another grappling hook. Lex narrowly catches Superboy, and then John kicks him in the face as Lex just tries to get him to tell him what the hell's going on, and then he runs down an alley. Meanwhile, in the elevator shafts, Robin descends and enters a LexCorp lab and calculates that based on John's speed, he has about 20 seconds. John hides in the alley, but Lex quickly finds him, and John tells him that they broke out of St. Mary's orphanage to meet the greatest hero of them all, the man who made himself the Superman of Metropolis. And Lex is like, "Oh, really? Then why is your friend currently planting explosives in my lab?" Then Lex flies into the lab where they find Damian planting explosives. Lex destroys the bomb and gives him till the count of 3 to explain what they're doing, but Damian instead gives him the count of 5, so he can find the other 11 bombs. Damian slides under Lex's legs, grabs John, and jumps into the elevator shaft. They escape and land on a rooftop, you know, the best place to hide from a flying man, while he explains that the explosives weren't real. Then he brings out a tablet from somewhere, and says that John is a terrific distraction. John picks up Damian and says that he should have never left home, and that Damian is always using him, and Damian's like,
whatever. I got what I came here for. See ya.
John says that if he's such a super detective, why did Luthor catch him? And he's like,
you're not even a halfway decent Batman.
Then Damian yawns as he shows off the bat screen of his batlet of LexCorp security logs being downloaded and says,
you're right. I'm better.
Geez, this is so easy to do a kid's voice for these videos. It's just like using my normal one. Several minutes and $3.75 later, the duo hang around in an alley as Damian looks over the files. Then he finds a recording of a kid who looks a lot like Reggie entering a lab with Amazo stuff in it. Then he does something, and the camera dies. Damian says it'll take him about a week to watch the 175 hours worth of footage, but says that he will get to the bottom of whatever's going on. Then he grabs a tarp and pulls it back to reveal the Robin cycle. Then John super fast forwards all the footage and finds the guy. Well, lots of the guy. How does he super fast forward the footage, even though there's typically a limit of how fast it can go? Who knows? They find recordings of the Reggie lookalike in 4 locations at the same time. Damian suggests clones or maybe morphing, and John says that he just doesn't have time for this. Then he shoots his grappling hook again and says that the kid's name is Reggie. So they ride on Damian's bike through the desolate valley roads outside Metropolis, I guess, and they arrive at a dark warehouse. Damian says that according to the article he found on Reggie, his entire family were powered up by the Amazo Virus. John says his dad said everyone lost their powers when it was cured. And Damian says,
my dad says your dad isn't big on the details. 5% of the survivors kept their powers.
Then he explains that the family got powers and became a new superhero team, but they all disappeared. So the two look for a way in, and as Damian is inspecting the structural integrity and architecture of the building so that they can scale it, John says,
hey genius, check out this detail.
And he points to the giant open door. That's convenient. They enter to find the living room set, and John gets nervous and says that they should call their dads. But Damian refuses to hand it over to them. John says,
what's the point of me being here? To bail you out when you mess up? I don't mess up. Well, you didn't invite me to be part of the Teen Titans. What part of teen? Don't you understand?
Then Damian reads a newspaper he found with an article about the missing family, and John stumbles back in horror from the corpses of the family and says that he's calling his dad. Damian tries to stop him, but John just pushes him away and leaps out of the building. And Damian's like,
fine, fly away. Crybaby.
John lands in the woods, almost about to vomit, when he notices a little girl hiding behind a tree. Meanwhile, Damian notices that there are 5 chairs with straps on them, but only 4 bodies. John then walks through the moonlight towards the crying girl and introduces himself as Superboy, before asking if she ran away from the warehouse, and she mutters out that she did. Damian, after staring at the 4 dead bodies and 5 torture chairs, finally comes to the realization that, hey, someone's missing, as a shadow sneaks up behind him, just like Peter Pan. Then it's revealed John is being stalked through the woods by something large and in charge. Then it's revealed John is being stalked by something large in the woods. The Batman. And in the warehouse, Superman readies his heat vision. Flashback time. In Providence, Rhode Island, several months ago, a family of superpowered individuals fights Titano, the kryptonite ape. Titano has a hold of Sarah, the youngest daughter, as she calls out for Reggie, and Reggie runs through the crowd and gives a shitty comic book one-liner and multiplies himself. 67 seconds later, the Super Duffies have defeated Titano. Back at now, John protects himself from batarangs as Damian actually dodges Superman's heat vision. John punches his friend's father into a tree, but then he notices Batman's ear break off and sparks coming out. And meanwhile, Damian says,
you're obviously an android.
Then John and Damian start talking on a comm link. they have, I guess. And they each call for the other's help. Superboy tells the girl, Sarah, to find a safe place before he's clocked by Batman. Good thing this happened in the middle of nowhere, or else that could seriously damage the public's image of these heroes. As John is about to blow Batman away, Damian crashes into him. Damian tells him,
I was thrown from the warehouse by that bucket of bullets, dressed up as the world's worst superhero.
God, why are you such a little prick? Damian says John would know what is happening if he hadn't run off like a little scared baby. And John's like,
I wasn't scared. Besides, I was fighting this rusty version of your dad. This cowardice is exactly why my father doesn't trust yours. Your father's a psychopath. Even my mom says so. Is that before or after she changes your diapers? I hate you. Happy to hear it.
Then the two get into a fight as the Batman and Superman robots just like stare confused. Suddenly the boys jump out of the smoke screen dropped by Damian and they clock the robots before being grabbed. Then Sarah appears and orders the robots to drop them, and then the bots fall into the grass. Damian demands to know who she is, and John tells her to ignore the little guy over there and asks her if she's with the robots. Sarah tells them that there will be more on their way and that they need to leave now. So they race through the woods as John gives Sarah a piggyback ride, and she explains that she has the power to control machines from the Amazo Virus. John asks what the Amazo Virus is, and Damian explains it to him. If you forgot, just rewind the video to where I explained it earlier. Then Sarah explains what happened. She says that Reggie was never nice to her, and he would use his powers to multiply his strength and split his mind and keep his family locked in that warehouse for weeks. He didn't want to be a superhero anymore, so he stole the Amazo armor from LexCorp and has been using it to create superpowered Amazo bots. Back in the clearing, the dad bots get up, break down, and recreate themselves as Robin and Superboy. Then they emit this, like, liquid mercury and form more androids. I don't know how this works. Is it an infinite supply of the liquid mercury? It'd have to be. Meanwhile, John says that he can see the bike with his supervision, and Damian's like,
What, you idiot? You could see it with your regular vision. It's right over there.
Sarah says she wants to save her brother, and she knows he's still in there, somewhere. John says that she is coming with them, and tells her that the Justice League will help. But Damian yells that they don't need the Justice League, and John calls him nuts. Then John touches the cycle, so Damian shoots his grappling gun again, and wraps up Superboy before he just breaks the rope. They start to argue as Sarah freaks out because they're still too close, and he's retaking control. Then an explosion goes off, and the Robin cycle is destroyed by Sarah. She stares at them and says,
We escaped the prison. The girl, she was inside me somehow, took control with her powers, but now I'm back.
Suddenly, Sarah comes to again and says that it's her brother, and that he made this body so that he could kill his family over and over and over again. Then Reggie regains control of her, and Sarah falls to the ground as shadowy figures surround them. John picks her up as two robotic versions of themselves stand across from our pint-sized heroes. The robots say,
Hi, my name is Reggie. And thanks to Amazo, I am you. There's over 24 of us here. We each have your powers. Give me back my sister, and I promise you will die quickly.
Damian says in retrospect that they should have called their fathers, but hey, hindsight's 20/20. Then Sarah shouts, now! And puts her hand out, emitting like reddish-orange light towards the androids, crushing them into like little egg bots before exploding. Damian turns around to run away and says that inside the warehouse is the real Sarah, so the two run back through the woods as their Sarah bot holds off the androids. She doesn't do a very good job because they're almost immediately chased by the androids. And in case you're confused, Jonathan asks Damian,
So the girl I saved was really a superpowered robot who was a real girl on the inside? Those super senses really come in handy, huh?
Then Robin beheads a Superboy drone before John piggybacks him as Damian hacks into the head. Damian orders John to put him down, and they get surrounded by the androids. Damian exclaims,
It's time for Batman, and it's time for Batman and Robin.
Nope, that's not right.
It's time for Robin and Batman to make...
God damn it, I did it again.
It's time for Robin and Superboy to make a stand. Why's your name first? I'm older. I'm taller.
Then the boys fight themselves in a probably very cathartic battle. Suddenly, Damian is swarmed by the Superboy androids, and as John tries to save him, he's pulled down into a round of robins. At 4 a.m. on the Kent farm, Lois wakes up to have John go out and feed the animals because Dad's with the Justice League. And at Wayne Manor, Alfred wakes Damian up for his first workout. They both enter the kids' rooms to find empty beds and the kids missing. And Alfred sighs and says that at least when Dick snuck out, he had the decency to make a pillow dummy. Back at the warehouse, Superboy and Robin hang upside down, chained up, as Damian asks if Superboy has any powers. They start to argue, but then Kid Amazo appears. Reggie lets off this psychopathic ramble about how they look like Superman and Batman had twins and how much he hates siblings because, like, they're lesser versions of him, even though that's not how it works. Then he exposits about how the Amazo armor he stole lets him create more duplicates and more powers. Damian yells at John, and John says that it wasn't his idea to track down the stolen Amazo armor, and that they should have just let Mr. Luthor track it down since it's his tech. Kid Amazo gets very angry at that sentence and yells that it wasn't Luthor's tech. The Amazo Virus is in his blood, and that armor was stolen from him. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, Reggie. You were a normal fucking human before the Amazo Virus got you, which was created by Lex Luthor. Anyway, he, repeats what he just said about the suit and his powers and explains that he could duplicate anyone again. And he explains that he keeps his family close, sedated, and depowered, and makes them watch as he kills their androids over and over again. Then he brings out his real family, and Kid Amazo says that Sarah always had the hardest time following the rules, and she spits on his mask. Kid Amazo says that Robin and Superboy have forced his hand to attack the Justice League sooner than he planned. John starts freaking out, trying to get out of the chains, but Damian tells him to calm down, because they'll be free in a few seconds. John asks how, and Damian says that he can see the future. Then, Lex Luthor smashes into the building and demands to have his Amazo armor back. John asks how Damian did it, and he says that he sent out a message from that Amazo head that he hacked into earlier. Luthor frees them both, and Damian says that the guy in the Amazo armor wants to take over the world, and Lex says, "It won't be this world, I assure you that." Then Kid Amazo leaps for Robin, but he's knocked out of the way by John. Damian tells Luthor Kid Amazo is his target, and Luthor's like, "Who the hell do you think you are, commanding Superman, boy?"
I'm Robin, old man. Batman's better half.
Then the boys save the family as Kid Amazo orders his Amazos to stop them. The boys race through the woods and hide the family behind this big-ass rock, and then Superboy, Robin, and Sarah race back the way they came. Meanwhile, Lex fights a child and says that the armor was being held in his lab for the safety of the world, and Lex is then held down and says, "You can't break me! I'm Lex Luthor! I'm Superman!" Then Superboy leaps over Lex's bald head and punches Kid Amazo right in the face. Then all the androids melt down into the mercury stuff, and it all morphs onto Kid Amazo as he re-merges with himself. But he begins to scream in agony. And it's revealed that Sarah is controlling the suit, and she rips it off of Reggie's body. The Amazo skeleton then crawls towards John for some reason, but Lex, stomps on it and says that he's calling the cops. Then he calls them delinquents, but he says that they gained his mercy, and that they have 3 minutes. Luthor tells Sarah, "Hello, little girl. Don't worry. Your brother will live and pay for his crimes. And with your cooperation, I can get your whole family back on their feet. And you could become a real heroic youth. Unlike these two." What? Then he looks over and finds Superboy and Robin are gone. Later in the early morning, the boys arrive at the Kent farm. John tells Damian to find his own way home, and then he comedically sneaks around the house and leaps up to his bedroom as Damian shoots his fucking grappling hook again and climbs the tree. And standing in John's bedroom is a very angry Lois and a rather upset Alfred. And Lois demands that they start talking. An unknown amount of time later, Damian sits around the Batcave, bored and grounded. He complains about the Kents and how he has no idea why Bruce spends so much time with adult Superman. And Alfred tells him that his father considers many things a waste, like sleep, but one thing he never doubts is his friendship with Superman. Damian's like,
Super loser, more like.
At the Kent farms, Lois yells at John for using his powers while he's grounded. Then Clark comes out and says that after he's done with his chores, to begin packing for Metropolis. You see, they're moving to the big city, and John is not too happy about it, and John tells him not to remind him, and that he just won't have any privacy in the city. Clark says not to worry, and that he'll love it, and John says that he doesn't want to move, and that he likes it in Hamilton County, and that all his friends are here. Lois says he'll make new friends, and Clark says that after all they've been through, moving is what's best for the family. Then John rips off his shirt and leaps away as he yells at his parents in rebellion. And Clark says that they should just let him burn off some steam, that he'll keep an eye on him. Later that night in Metropolis, John jumps around the city as he says how much it sucks. Then he says that Robin also sucks. Then he emerges from like a power box in the Batcave, startling Robin. Damian swats at John, but he leaps over him and slams right into the giant penny. Damian then lets loose 6 batarangs as he shouts that there's an intruder. John then yells at him to stop throwing stuff, and Damian says that John could be an escaped Amazo drone, for all he knows. The two then walk through the Batcave as they chat, and Damian asks why John's there, and he says,
I ran away from home. My parents are really mad that they found out about the Amazo stuff. Did your dad get mad? Who can tell? He's always mad. Why are you here? I found out we're moving to Metropolis. I needed some space, I guess. I wanted to see if you had any advice. And to use the bathroom? You should embrace change instead of moping around and acting like we're friends. Yeah, not like you were crying to Alfred about not going out with Batman. I did not cry! Wah, he should've let me go out with him tonight. Boo-hoo. My father has the patience of a saint for putting up with your family. Get it through your head. We are not friends.
Then Damian palm strikes John, so John does it back, and Damian uses his grappling gun again, and they fight in the air of the Batcave as Damian unleashes like 22 batarangs on John. Where was he keeping those? How fucking, like, thin are they that they're just so storable? Robin kicks Superboy in the face and then leaps away, and then John breaks off a giant pipe from, like, something and launches it at Damian. Eventually, their fight leads them to the front of the T-Rex, and suddenly they hear,
Master Damian, what's going on down there?
oh my god, fucking geriatric Alfred. John hides inside the T-Rex, but Alfred easily notices the red cape hanging out of the hatch. So Alfred gives him some food, and they argue. Then he says,
I watched your fathers go from wary suspicion around each other to a trusted confidant. It was not easy. It took time, patience, and far too many arguments. As you grow older, it's easier to become rigid in your ways. Shutting yourself out from new and old friends is never a healthy habit, specifically in your father's line of work.
The boys then calm down, and then Bruce and Clark appear. And Damian yells,
How would you like it if I followed you everywhere and listened in on your conversation?
You do.
John asks if it's true that his dad and Batman argue all the time, and Clark says that it was like that before they discovered how much they can relate to each other. Bruce pours a glass of water, and Superman eats something, and Clark asks,
Who do you think would win if we fought? You know, just hypothetically.
Me.
But I'm stronger, and I can fly.
Me.
I think your cowl's too tight. Clark tells John that the move to Metropolis is gonna happen whether he likes it or not, and that it won't be easy, but it's where their future is, and that John has to accept that. Yeah, I bet you wouldn't be saying that, Clark, if you knew where that was gonna lead. Clark says that maybe it's time for John to begin his own adventures, you know, with someone closer to his age. But no going out alone. Then he lets the kids leave, as he wonders how he's gonna sell the idea to Lois. Then Robin and Superboy set off into the night. The end. Well, I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of What Is. If you did, make sure to leave a like and a comment. Especially a comment. I love reading those. Tell me what you thought of this book, and, hey, I'll see you next time.